Welcome back to my YouTube channel, everybody. I'm joined today by Rosary O'Neill and Rory O'Neill Schmitt, and today with them we'll talk about Carnival in New Orleans, because Rosary is the author of a very good book about this topic called New Orleans Carnival Krewes, and Rory is her daughter, and funny enough, Rory was the first person to be featured twice on this channel, and now she's the first person to be featured for the third time on this channel. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much for having us. We're so happy to be here, and happy Mardi Gras, everybody.
Happy Mardi Gras.
Absolutely. So just to break the ice, can you explain my viewers what sparked your interest in Mardi Gras in New Orleans? Whoever of you wants to answer.
You can start,
Sure.
Roy.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So I grew up in New Orleans. And so growing up in New Orleans, every year it happens around February or March. They had these giant parades and they throw toys, they threw beads, and it was a lot of parties and a lot of fun. And I thought everyone had Mardi Gras. I didn't know it was special to New Orleans. So I think it was really just growing up, a lot of happy memories, families coming together, communities coming together. And I love that it's a tradition that continues,
Okay, so let's start from the basics. Like Carnival in New Orleans is not a single day, even if it's called Mardi Gras, it means Fat Tuesday. So the name would suggest it's just one day, but actually it's not. So can you explain us what happens in the previous weeks?
Well, there are all kind of parades that go on for like 40 days before Mardi Gras. And I just have to let Rory talk a little bit more about that, because there's so many fabulous things that are thrown from these floats that kids get completely hooked. This is one that's being thrown today from Muse's parade, all women parade. And then there are others. I'm going to show you now some beads that I have that I could be wearing that are also thrown. Some have rats on them, and some have little devil heads. So you can see where a child might be fascinated by going to these monstrous parades down the street and perhaps catching these sorts of toys.
Okay, so in your book, actually, at the end, let's start from the end. You talk
Okay.
about how New Orleans Carnival is today. So let's say that a person totally from outside jumps to New Orleans on Mardi Gras. What does these celebrations look like?
It looks like, I would say, Disney World, just magnified. So you probably feel like you're dreaming. It's so unreal. It's such a fantasy. And there's so much excitement, both from locals to people who are traveling from out of town. Everyone, even what they dress, purple, green, and gold are the colors of Mardi Gras. So you'll see people wearing those colors. My sister wore purple, green, and gold every day this week. People decorate their houses like floats, like house floats, because during the pandemic, we actually didn't have parades in New Orleans. So they instead decorated their houses like floats. You'll just see a lot of parties, a lot of excitement. Just people are really happy and friendly, and there's always something happening on the streets. Like there's Muse's parade tonight. Right now, we're actually in something called Deep Gras, which is kind of like the best time right before Mardi Gras Day. So Mardi Gras season starts on King's Day, January 6th. That's when you can start having king cake. But about the week before Mardi Gras, it's kind of just amplified. So if you are going to visit and you're ready to party, this is the time to be in New Orleans.
People will often stake out a seat along the parade route with like a ladder where they can hold their children up to get, beads and whatever. And actually, I was driving down the parade route 2 days ago, and there were people 2 days early already staking out seats. It's unbelievable. So be sure that they get on the front row. And then the police, of course, put barricades up so you can't actually go on the street, because people would run in the street to catch these things. So there's this sense of tremendous anticipation of a big event. And it's kind of aided by the sound of police motorcycles, because in the parade, they have bands that go along playing jazz music, and they have these police motorcycles. And for instance, yesterday, a whole bunch of police motorcycles went scooting in the street. They were looking for the parade or something. They had lost the parade. I mean, it's just crazy.
And the city is so interesting too. Just looking at the oak trees, we have these giant oak trees that overarch on the major streets like St. Charles Avenue, and you'll look up and you'll see Mardi Gras beads, because the floats are pulled by tractors, and they're paper mache floats with heads that twirl and things that light up. That's very exciting. but the city will actually have those Mardi Gras beads in the trees for the rest of the year. So right now there's a lot. Eventually they'll fall down with the rains, but you can see just how festive it is all the time. And a lot of people walking around too and just really enjoying life. You know, laissez le bon temps rouler is our let the good times roll is the motto of the city, and this is the time, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, something I totally was not aware of is that it actually starts right after Christmas.
Right.
I didn't think it was that long. Okay.
Yes.
Well, let me ask you. No, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, just King's Day is the traditional celebration. For New Orleans has a lot of Catholic people who live there, and the culture is King's Day is the day that the three magi brought gifts to baby Jesus. And so on King's Day is when the bakeries and grocery stores start selling King's cake, which is delicious. It's a round cake covered with purple, green, and gold sugar, and inside there's a tiny plastic baby. And if you get a piece of cake with a baby inside, it's good luck. And you have to throw the next party.
Yeah, my brother actually swallowed a baby rather than have to the party. He was very shy as a young boy.
Well, let me ask you the opposite question. It doesn't stop. Mardi Gras doesn't stop at the Ash Wednesday, but actually it influences all the celebrations in the city, even for other holidays. Can you elaborate on this?
Well, I think that there's a lot of dancing and festivity all throughout the year. And now, of course, they even have a big convention center and a place where they build floats so that if you visit New Orleans, you could actually take a tour of previous floats. And if you went to the museum here in the French Quarter, you could see actually a whole Mardi Gras experience on screen that would surround you and tell you what it was like. So you can kind of even not in Mardi Gras, experience Mardi Gras in New Orleans, yeah. Mm-hmm. And bands hire out. I mean, living in the French Quarter, it's at least once a week you're going to hear a band playing something for people marching in a wedding, and they're throwing things too. So this idea of joy is pretty phenomenal, actually.
Yeah.
Well, I remember being in New Orleans quite a few years ago, but the most striking thing is that it's a city of music. You can hear music, not only jazz music, but also reggae and all other kinds of music everywhere. How does that change during Mardi Gras, or is influenced by Mardi Gras?
I would just say you hear music all the time. I mean, even in the French Quarter, they'll have these balconies and there'll be brass bands playing on a balcony. You'll walk into a bar to get a drink, and you can actually get drinks to go in New Orleans in a plastic cup, and there'll be a rock band performing, or Rebirth Brass Band. That's my favorite music in New Orleans too. You'll just kind of hear it all the time. You'll see people on the streets, playing in front of people too. So it's a very musical time, I would say, and lots of performances too, and concerts, because so many people are in town. There are a lot of music venues that are having concerts, like Tipitina's, which is a local place.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and let's go to the history. How did it start, and what made New Orleans the city where the carnival is biggest, actually, in all America?
You want to? I can start this one. So, my mom actually studied New Orleans Mardi Gras as part of her dissertation at UCLA, and wrote a book about Mardi Gras Krewes because she studied theater history, and there's so much ritual involved in Mardi Gras. There's just beautiful accessories people wear. Mom, do you want to show the crown, Grandpa's crown?
And of course, I'm going to show this crown about my father. My parents were crazy about carnival. My father was in 7 different balls and parade groups, and he was king of 3 different ball events. I have this, so you can actually see. I mean, they had this in the living room in a glass case. They were so thrilled by it. But this really dates back to the Renaissance, the masks. When people perform for the king and queen, and that's exactly what happens at these balls. Someone usually is a king, and I have my mother's crown because she was the queen of several, and they live for this thing. I mean, he took off work for at least a week. And as I said, 3 times he was king and she was queen. So that goes back to the whole idea of the leader parading through town, the king and queen, and then the performances at court. And still, there's so many balls that go on here of all types with all groups. It's impossible not to belong to something. Mhm.
Yeah. And one thing that we did discover, Mom and I recently wrote a book about Edgar Degas, the French impressionist. His mother was actually from New Orleans, and he visited New Orleans. And so when we were researching the book, we learned that he was here for Mardi Gras 150 years ago. And so we interviewed a scholar in New Orleans studies, C.W. Cannon, and he told us that there's records of 1699 was one of the first written accounts of Carnival in New Orleans. And so it's changed over the years, but it's definitely been part of the city for a very long time.
And it was
Well,
always a
go ahead.
place where people spent a lot of money. You see, this is a huge engine for the city, because even when Edgar came over, he came over with costumes from the Paris Opera that he had purchased for people to wear in his family during the Mardi Gras event. So it wasn't like I'm just putting on, a little hat. I purchased a major outfit, so like 10 or 20 major outfits from Paris Opera that we're going to bring over here for the balls and parades.
Right. And people love dressing up in costume. I mean, that's just part of it. And you don't have to wear something really expensive nowadays, but people just have a ball. I had some friends in the Cleopatra parade, and they dressed up like Cleopatra. I mean, it was just so fun to see people just really just feeling very free and light and fun,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Well, you mentioned something that is very interesting. How did it change over the centuries?
How did it change? Go ahead,
I
Rory.
would just say that today what we'll see is a lot of more local groups are doing walking processions. So, being in a parade or riding on a float can cost several $1,000s, but there are walking parades, which are just as fun. So, and they're really funny. Like there's a Chewbacca one that happened in the French Quarter just a few weeks ago that people dressed up Star Wars themed, and they have other ones all the time. People do DIY, do it yourself costumes, and they walk together, and there'll be marching bands or small bands performing. But I would say that's how it's changed. More people are involved, and it's also expanded. It's not just on one or two streets downtown. There's things in Kenner, which is a suburb of New Orleans. There's events in Diamond Head, Mississippi. It's really expanded a lot and included everyone really in the area.
Mm-hmm.
What is the role of societies, something I read in your book, Rosary, in organizing these parades, and what is their role nowadays, or how has it changed during the centuries?
I think that it's changed because it's become more and more expansive. I mean, there used to be maybe 3 or 4 parades and balls by wealthy people for mostly their friends, and now it's like 50 balls, if you can even count more than that, and for all kind of people have balls, either in their house or outside, or they parade in the streets. So it's a much more diversified situation, I think, now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of my favorite parades is Harry Connick Jr.'s parade, Orpheus, which is just one of the most fun, inclusive parades, and just celebrates life, and music, of course.
Of course. Does Mardi Gras have a social impact on the city, like also in other periods of the year?
Well, I think it has the effect of bringing a lot of joy to people. I mean, and people love to sort of dress up. There are a lot of parties with, foolish jewelry, and come in all white, or come tonight in red and pink. I mean, people that if you were in another city, you got an invitation, people would think that was stressful to have to think about. But here it's like, oh, that's kind of fun. Let's try that. So there is this, it's kind of a champagne attitude toward life, that you can't be here and not laugh a lot. On the other hand, as a serious artist, it's very hard to sit down in a boring room by yourself with a piece of paper and a computer and write anything, because there's so much partying, there's so much distraction, there's always an excuse to have fun. That's all I can say.
Yes. And I think that's one of the special pieces about New Orleans, is that it's almost like a rebirth or a resurrection or a renewal. There's so much hope because, New Orleans has experienced a lot of tragedy and a lot of hurricanes and a lot of, pain. And so to have this time of year that you can look forward to or just really celebrate and let it all go, because you don't know what the future holds. We don't know. So it's really wonderfully and uplifting to see that excitement.
And the tradition is going on. So it's not just, something that your grandparents or parents told you about. Like today, I talked to my daughter, Dale, your sister. She said, I can't talk because we're going to every parade. She has a child 5 months old and a child 3. So, I mean, it's a lot of an effort to go to every parade, but, it's like a commitment.
And everything shuts down. The streets shut down. I mean, you can't be stuck somewhere. And people they really plan a lot of their year around this time. So, I mean, people's schedules are all booked up with all sorts of things, and you have to choose. It's not like there's just one parade or one event a night. There's several, which is pretty exciting.
And how did Mardi Gras change after Hurricane Katrina?
Well, I was actually in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina for Mardi Gras, and I have to say it was very, I don't know, over the top. There was so much excitement and joy, and it was very healing, I think, for the city to have that Mardi Gras right after Katrina, because of the city looks totally different afterwards. Yeah. So part of, I think, the healing.
Well, one thing that I forgot to mention is, where does the masquerading thing come from? Why do people dress up at Carnival? I'm Italian, but I don't know.
You're Italian, you don't know.
No, I don't. If you guys know and you want to explain us,
well,
you're more than
a
welcome.
lot of it was just fun. For example, if you would go to a carnival ball and you were a single woman or a married woman, somebody dressed up as a very exotic masked dancer could ask you to dance and you wouldn't know who they were. And that was a lot of fun. You see, because women sat in one section and they would have, which they call the call out section, and they would have a man in full dress would go down and call out, Rory Schmitt, Miss Rory Schmitt, Rory sitting there. And then she's called to the dance floor and there's a mascot set. I mean, that's so much fun, isn't it? I mean, it's so exotic, wild, so interesting. So the masked balls were a kind of seduction, if you will, and a way anybody could be attractive if they had a beautiful outfit.
And it was very, it's like a fantasy too. And you weren't allowed to take your mask off. If I remember, you weren't supposed to tell people who you are. So it's very freeing to wear costumes, and children too, historically have gotten dressed up too, even with outside of balls. It's just been part of, I think, the excitement and a little bit chaotic, of course, and a little crazy, but part of the fun, I think.
Okay, so let's go to strange things. What is the most unexpected thing you found out while researching for this book about New Orleans Carnival?
Go ahead, Mom.
Well, I mean, I thought it was something really unique. First of all, I thought it was something unique to New Orleans. And for me personally, it was very interesting when I studied it that the tradition went back so far in Europe with the parading and the masked balls and all that glamour. And I guess that was the history of it was the most exciting to me. That we were carrying out a tradition really of our forefathers and foremothers, if you will. We thought it was just ours.
Yeah, and something that, when I was reading, Mom, your book yesterday too, I was really excited because, there are aspects of the history of New Orleans and Mardi Gras that even locals don't know. So that was pretty thrilling for me, just to learn from you more about the history and, how it got started and how people socialized, and even how grand it is. On the parade routes, there'll be someone who lives on where the parades and floats will pass by, and they'll just open up their houses to family and friends and just, create such a beautiful place. And this tradition's been happening for a long time. But I think the details of the history, all the research that you did, to me, were quite fascinating. Yeah.
And the amount of money people spend on Carnival. I mean, the cost of these, I don't know, what was this crown would probably cost out of it. Handmade, it might cost, I don't know, $4,000 or $5,000 to wear one night, you see? And so that employs all these seamstresses and these decorators and that whole sense of celebration being something valuable. That's totally New Orleans.
Yeah.
You cannot
yes, the number one value in New Orleans is definitely fun. The Mardi Gras typifies that. Yeah.
Well, let's not forget before we finish to show the book. If you have it, feel free.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there you go, Rory.
Yeah, I definitely recommend all my viewers to buy it and read it. And if you want to say something more about your new book that you mentioned a few minutes ago, feel free.
Go ahead,
Sure,
Rory.
Mom, I think you have it. Do you have
I
the
do
book?
have the book. Yeah. This is our most recent book on New Orleans. Can you see it?
Yes, Edgar Degas was the famous French impressionist. His mother was Creole. She was from Louisiana, born in New Orleans, and he visited for 6 months, 1872 to 73, and he stayed for Mardi Gras. So he got to experience the carnival, which is great.
Okay, I still have to read it, and I definitely will, but I also recommend everyone else to do it.
Thank you so much, Leonardo. We really loved seeing you again.
It's
Of
an honor
course.
to be on your show.
So we reached the end of our conversation. So many thanks for your time again and for your very precious explanations that you give me and my viewers.
Oh, you're welcome. Happy Mardi Gras.
Happy Carnival. Yeah.
Happy Mardi Gras and happy Carnival to everybody. Thanks everybody for watching this, and see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.